There's a quiet kind of suffering that doesn't begin with shouting, slamming doors, or dramatic betrayals. It begins in stillness, in those subtle, everyday interactions that seem harmless on the surface, but carry with them the weight of emotional erosion, the kind of slow decay that doesn't break you all at once, but wears away at your spirit, piece by piece, until you no longer recognize the person you've become. This is not the pain of obvious cruelty, but the far more insidious ache that arises from being surrounded by people who, whether consciously or unconsciously, chip away at your confidence, your peace, and your very sense of self, all while claiming to care about you or pretending that nothing is wrong at all. Most of us grow up believing that harm comes from those who hate us or wish us ill. But the uncomfortable truth is that some of the deepest wounds are inflicted by those who profess to love us, by the friend who always has a backhanded compliment ready, by the parent whose affection feels conditional, or by the partner who constantly walks the line between concern and control. We tell ourselves that we are imagining things, that we are too sensitive, that we must be the problem, because the world has taught us to ignore the subtle signs of relational toxicity unless they come wrapped in clear abuse. But the body knows better. The soul knows better. And if you've ever felt constantly drained, confused, or hollow in the company of others, even those closest to you, then it may be time to take a closer look at the quiet damage being done. In this article, we will explore 7 signs that the people around you are slowly destroying you, not through open hostility, but through a pattern of emotional sabotage, invalidation, and neglect that slowly silences your inner truth and detaches you from your own well-being. This isn't about blame, nor is it about villainizing others, but rather about awareness, the kind of awareness that can set you free. Sign 1. They constantly minimize your emotions. One of the earliest and most painful ways that relational harm takes root is through the consistent minimization of your emotional experience, a pattern in which the people around you dismiss, belittle, or rationalize your feelings until you begin to question your right to feel at all. This doesn't always come in the form of cruelty or mockery. It often arrives cloaked in concern or logic, like when someone tells you you're overreacting, that things aren't that bad, or that others have it worse. What makes this behavior so dangerous is that it teaches you, slowly and silently, that your emotional truth does not matter, that your pain is excessive or inconvenient, and that vulnerability is a flaw to be corrected rather than a doorway to connection. Over time, you begin to internalize this message, learning not only to hide your emotions from others, but to suppress them from yourself, burying your grief, your anger, your fear, beneath layers of shame and self-doubt. But as psychologist Gabor Maté reminds us, emotions that are not expressed do not simply disappear. They become embedded in the body, manifesting as chronic pain, fatigue, anxiety, and illness. Your emotions are signals, not inconveniences. And when someone constantly teaches you to mute those signals, they are not protecting your sanity, they are eroding your ability to live fully. Sign 2. They demand your emotional labor, but offer none in return. There's a particularly cruel kind of relationship that disguises itself as closeness, but is built entirely upon one-sided emotional labor, where you are expected to be endlessly available, endlessly supportive, endlessly strong, while your own needs are ignored, dismissed, or forgotten entirely. In these dynamics, you become the emotional caretaker, the therapist, the cheerleader, the emergency contact, but only in one direction. People like this are quick to call you when something goes wrong in their lives, quick to collapse into your arms when the world gets heavy, but when you reach out in pain or need, their response is tepid at best, absent at worst. They disappear, change the subject, or minimize what you're going through. And the worst part is that over time, you begin to feel guilty for even having needs at all. You start to believe the myth that your strength is a permanent fixture, that your role is to serve rather than to be seen, and you shrink yourself to fit a narrative of usefulness. This is not love. This is not connection. It is emotional parasitism. It is the slow theft of your energy and your empathy by those who have no intention of reciprocating it. And if you feel constantly drained, constantly responsible, constantly unacknowledged, it may be because those around you have mistaken your compassion for compliance. Sign 3. They guilt you for having boundaries, another devastating red flag. Often overlooked in the name of family, friendship, or loyalty is the way some people respond to your boundaries, as though your decision to protect your well-being is a personal attack against them. These are the people who frame your no as selfishness, who interpret your need for space as abandonment, who question your motives when you ask for respect, making you feel like the villain simply for choosing yourself. Healthy relationships honor boundaries, even when they don't like them. Unhealthy ones punish you for having them. This kind of guilt-based manipulation is particularly corrosive because it trains you to associate self-respect with relational tension, teaching you that peace only exists when you surrender your autonomy. And so you begin to bend, to compromise, to shrink, until one day you wake up and realize that you are no longer living a life that reflects your values, but one that exists entirely in service of avoiding conflict. Boundaries are not betrayals, they are expressions of self-awareness and self-preservation. Anyone who treats them as crimes is slowly destroying your ability to feel safe in your own skin. Sign 4. They undermine you in subtle, public ways. Not all harm is loud or obvious. In fact, some of the most damaging interactions happen in the form of subtle public jabs, sarcastic comments, or seemingly harmless jokes that, when repeated over time, create a culture of quiet humiliation. These are the people who interrupt your stories to correct you, who laugh a little too hard when you make a mistake, who share your private moments for their own entertainment, all under the guise of just joking. And you laugh too, because to not laugh is to risk being called uptight or sensitive. But inside, something tightens, a sense of betrayal, of being made small in front of others, of being turned into a caricature for someone else's amusement. Danger of these microaggressions is not in their volume, but in their accumulation. One or two may seem forgettable, but over weeks, months, years, they send a message. You are not respected. You are not safe here. You are not seen as whole or worthy. And your nervous system listens. It keeps score. It begins to anticipate ridicule, to fear visibility, to flinch at the sound of your own name. This is not a joke, it is death by 1,000 cuts. Sign 5. They sabotage your growth through doubt and fear. One of the clearest signs that someone is threatened by your growth is not that they openly attack your ambitions, but that they subtly plant seeds of doubt every time you try to rise. They will question your decisions under the mask of concern, pointing out all the risks, all the reasons you might fail, all the ways in which your dream is unrealistic or selfish or dangerous. They will remind you of your past mistakes, bring up worst-case scenarios, and phrase it all as love. But it is not love. It is fear, and not your fear, theirs. Because your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. Your courage becomes a mirror to their own compromises. And rather than reflect on that, they try to pull you back down, to keep you small, contained, predictable. They may not even be aware of what they are doing, but the effect is the same. You begin to second-guess yourself, to hesitate, to settle. And a life lived in hesitation is a life half-lived. Sign 6. They emotionally isolate you from others. One of the most dangerous dynamics in toxic relationships is induced isolation, the process by which someone slowly and silently separates you from your support system under the guise of care, concern, or protection. They make subtle comments about your friends, plant doubts about the people who uplift you, or create drama that forces you to choose between peace and connection. Over time, you find yourself declining invitations, justifying distance, avoiding joy, until one day you look around and realize that your world has grown smaller, lonelier, quieter. And in that quiet, they gain more control. You begin to rely solely on them for validation, affection, and perspective. You forget what freedom feels like. This is not protection. This is imprisonment. And while it may not come with physical chains, the psychological weight of forced isolation is just as heavy, just as deadly, and far harder to see until it's too late. Sign 7. They make you feel like you are never enough. Perhaps the most spiritually corrosive sign of all is when someone consistently makes you feel like nothing you do is quite right, that your love isn't enough, your presence isn't enough, your efforts are never enough. This isn't always expressed through criticism. Often, it shows up through emotional withholding, through an absence of recognition, through the constant raising of the bar, so that you are always striving but never arriving. And slowly, you begin to believe that you are fundamentally lacking, that you must work harder, be better, achieve more just to earn the most basic forms of love and acceptance. This is not love. This is emotional starvation. And it teaches you that your worth is conditional, that your existence is only valuable when it is productive or pleasing or perfect. No one thrives under those conditions. No one grows when love feels like a test. And if you are surrounded by people who only see your worth when you're sacrificing for them, then you are not being loved, you are being used. Conclusion. Your healing begins with awareness. The truth is painful, but it is also freeing. You cannot heal in the same environment that is making you sick. You cannot find peace in a space that profits from your silence. And you cannot become whole while shrinking to fit someone else's fear. It may not be easy to walk away. It may not be possible to change others. But what you can do is begin to see clearly, honestly, and without guilt. You can begin to name what is happening. And from that naming comes the power to choose differently, to surround yourself with people who nourish your growth, who listen when you speak, who honor your boundaries, who celebrate your joy without fear or resentment. Because the people around you matter more than you know. They shape your nervous system, your immune system, your worldview, your future. You deserve to be surrounded by love that builds, not burns. And the first step to that life is this: noticing who is slowly destroying you, and then having the courage to stop letting them.